Well, welcome today. We are here for another community conversation session. My name is Taryn Blake. I'm the Community Engagement Program Manager for our Siemens software community. I'll be your host for the enablement session today. We are talking about collaborative design with Designcenter X Solid Edge, and this is part two of this topic in our series. Our speaker for today is Sangamesh Sandur. Sangamesh has been at Siemens since 2011, and he presently supports Teamcenter integration for Solid Edge and Solid Edge portfolio products. He has around 24 years of experience in automotive, semiconductor, and aerospace industry supporting NX, Solid Edge, and Teamcenter products. He has been part of global technical enablement teams since 2019. He holds his bachelor's degree in engineering from Karnataka University in Dharwad, India. That's it for my introduction. Sangamesh, feel free to steal the screen.
Yeah, hello everyone. This is the continuation of part one, part one session, which we covered on 24th February, mainly on collaborative design using Designcenter X Solid Edge, focusing on built-in data management. Uh, before uh, uh, Before going for the agenda today, I would just would like to recap on what we covered on the first session. That's the part one. So this was mainly helpful for the new customers, like new Solid Edge customers who can start the design and manage the design or projects on the cloud directly. But for the customers, that is the legacy customers who are already using Solid Edge and managing their data locally. And when they move to Solid Edge the Designcenter X Solid Edge, in that case, they might need to upload their projects to cloud before they can start working on that. So that's where the part two, the session two, helps in with covering those functionalities mainly. Like we'll go through preparing the data before upload, and we also go through some of the functionalities like Design Manager and uploading the documents to cloud using the Add to Teamcenter and Add to Teamcenter interactive functionalities. And we'll also cover some of the cloning features which will help you to reuse some of your existing design into your new projects. And finally, we'll end up with some of the synchronize and projects options which are available within Solid Edge in managed environment, and end up with the Q&A session. So most of the session I will try to cover live, and maybe on what's new with respect to Teamcenter 2512. I have a couple of slides as I could not show them in this session because the production environment which I'm using is still on TC 2506. So let me start with the data prep tool here, and then continue with the design manager and some of the uh, uh, uploading the documents using the Add to Teamcenter and Add to Teamcenter interactive option. So before we upload the documents to cloud, the data needs to be prepared well so that the upload will be successful, and you, as per your requirement, like the broken links or the missing properties, duplicate file names or duplicate document numbers can be avoided, and those can be fixed in this data preparation activity. So for data preparation, we use the utility option, which is available as a part of the Choose PDM integration. And once you initiate that, basically it allows you to create a master list, collecting, which basically collects all the data, and it also identifies the missing links, and it also provides you the option to fix or replace the missing links. And when it comes to properties, you can identify the custom properties, validate those properties, and update them accordingly. So when you prepare the data for Teamcenter upload, that is for when you want to upload the documents to cloud, you can use the option that is you are basically preparing the data for Teamcenter, and you can set the working folder before you start uploading. Like in this case, I can set the certain folder wherein it basically stores all the master list. And when it comes to selecting the documents, you have two options here. Either you can select individual files, solid edge components or assemblies, or you can use the add folder option, which basically adds all the solid edge documents which are available in that folder. So in this case, let me go ahead and add a folder which basically contains a assembly, a hand mixture assembly, and then we'll go ahead and grab that data. So as we selected the folder, it include we can highlight what are the different type of solid edge documents which needs to be considered for this data preparation, and similarly we can include the all the subfolders, so that all the subfolders and corresponding properties will also get populated as we move forward and generate the import list. So once we generate the import list, basically it reads all the solid edge documents in that folder, and populates the corresponding properties, as well as it also highlights in case there are some missing interpart links, which are part of that folder, or some of the assemblies which basically are part of that folder. So in this case, basically it is showing there are two broken links, and it is also asking us like how would like to process, whether we want to continue with that. So if you go ahead and view this link, basically it shows the parts which the system could not found in the folder which you defined. Like in this case, there is a part 3 and part 2, which are which has some interpart copies from components which are available in the defined folder, but the part 3 and part 2, it is unable to find it. So this is up to you, like whether you want to include the interpart copies, links, information, and you want to include those component also for the upload later. So if you want to prep the data, including these interpart link parts, in that case, you would need to fix it first before uploading them to the cloud. So if I go ahead and analyze the data here, it basically shows you the list of components which are part of that folder, including the properties associated with each of those components. And also in the broken link sheet, it also shows you that information, that is basically the broken link information. So in that case, I know like where these parts resides, and in that case, I can define a replacement path and a replacement file name, so that I can fix those interpart links here. So I can go ahead and open up the folder where it can find the interpart links, these broken links. And similarly, I can update the file name here, which is same as the earlier one. And once I do that, I can go ahead and save this so that those also things gets fixed. So I can come back to the sheet. So just to update it, I can go back and say like fix those broken links. In that case, it fixes those links. And if I come back and generate the list again, it will not show those uh, broken links when I again add that folder. So that in that case, it means like yeah, the broken links have been fixed. And if I go ahead and generate the import list here. So at the beginning where it used to show uh, two missing links, those as those are fixed now, those will not get populated as a part of this uh, this data prep operation. So as I go ahead and see the broken link tab here, so you can see there are no further broken links, and now I can go ahead and work on these individual components where I need to basically update some of the mandatory Team Center properties, which is basically these are solid edge properties, but these gets mapped to Team Center properties on upload. So in this case, let me start with certain operations which are available as a part of this data preparation step. So as you open the master list, you have different tabs here which contains different options, some of the custom options, custom macros, which will help you in preparing the data. So if I go ahead, like yeah, these dashes can be avoided. It's recommended you can remove these dashes and keep the cell value empty or keep the cell value fixed or okay, keep the cell value populated with the certain values here. So to remove the dashes, the strings, we can use the remove string option here, and which basically removes uh, all the basically the dashes from the list here. Similarly, I can move some of the cells here, the rows here, especially as the top assembly and one of the part has been added at the bottom. So I can select that row and use the shift key to move it at the top. Similarly, the second sub-assembly, I will just move it at the top. And then I can go ahead and start adding different values here. So let me start with the document number. Document number actually this property on upload gets mapped to item ID in Team Center, that is on cloud. So we can name accordingly these cells here for each of the document here. If you leave this value blank, in that case, on upload, the next free available number gets assigned. So it's up to you, like whether you want to uh, fill this column with your custom part numbers, or you want the system to auto populate on upload. So in this case, I will just define some numbers, some custom numbers here, like say I can say community session hyphen 00001 for the top level assembly. Similarly, CSHM hyphen 0101 for the sub assembly. Similarly, I can define rest of the numbers for all the documents here. And revision, I can either keep it as A or 1 or 01. It is up to you, like what kind of revisioning methods you use at your industry. And project name, you can use the same file name, or you can map a custom attribute to the project name. So the revision value gets mapped to item revision value, and project name on upload gets mapped to item name, item revision name. So in this case, I will go ahead and copy these file names to this project column. So to copy that file name to project column, again, like we can use some of the macros which are available out of the box, like say copy file name to project. So from file name, it gets copied to the project name. It excludes the file extension here. So in this case, if I go ahead and say copy file name to project, you can see it basically excludes the extension, and it keeps the remaining value as it is, and the project name column gets populated. So the next column is Team Center item type. This column by default should be CAD design, because that is only the item type which is available in Solid Edge X built-in data management. So I'm going to keep that value as same. And the next values are some of the custom properties which I can define. So in your case, if you use out of the box template, data prep template, only these four columns are available. But in case you are preparing the data for upload and you want some of the your custom properties to get mapped to a team center property, in that case, you can add those columns accordingly. So in this case, if the template is available in your Solid Edge installation folder. So if I go ahead and search for the data prep, you can see the data prep utilities template. And if I open that, you can define the custom columns here. So like in this case, for Team Center, when I prepare the data for Team Center, these are the columns, mandatory columns, which it is to get considered while I'm doing the data prep. So when I do the data prep in the backend, it reads this the data prep utility template, and it opens up and generate the master list. So in this case, because I added these two columns, other than the rest of other properties, I added another two columns here. That is the reason you are seeing in the master list the part description and revision description. So part description is basically the item description, and revision description is item revision description. So the value what I add against each documents gets mapped to that team center property here. So for that, you can refer this table here. One of the custom property which I defined is the revision description. So that gets mapped to description in the team center. Similarly, the project name gets mapped to item revision name. Similarly, if you have a material info and material as a column, that also gets mapped to team center item revision material property. So whatever material I define against each component, that gets updated on upload, and that will also get mapped to team center item revision property. Okay. So let me add, let me copy this same data here. I don't want to add any further details here. So I will just paste in these columns. And similarly, the DC import time, you can, if you are first time importing it, it doesn't make sense. But if you are importing multiple times the same assembly, the import time depends based on which the system will try to find the latest data and provides you an option to either overwrite or exclude that part which has been modified locally. So in this case, I can go ahead and update the properties. So we already updated, but before going ahead, if you observe here, there are two draft files which are also added, which are because those draft files were part of that folder, and these are there are two draft files, and for the draft files, it has I basically assigned a different document number. That means on upload, the draft file uh, will carry to a different item ID and item revision. So, but that may not be my requirement here. So in my case, I want to associate the draft file under the same item revision where my solid edge 3D data set resides. So that is the master resides. So in that case, I can go ahead and use the from linked 3D option here. So which basically finds the draft files, and it basically assigns that document number, the same document number as its master. So in this case, you can see the document number for the part file was 119. So the same got assigned here. So on upload, the draft file will get saved as a different solid data set under the same item revision here. Okay. So in this case, I run that check. Similarly, there are multiple options which are available, which you can explore while you uploading, while you are preparing the data in bulk. And in this case, I can also go ahead and check the duplicates also in case there are duplicate file numbers, that is a duplicate document number that gets also validated, and it highlights in case there are duplicate document numbers which are defined in the master leads. So once I update all the properties, required properties, and fix all the broken links, I can go ahead and save this. And similarly, I can modify the properties on this dialog here. So using the so that it basically updates all the properties for all the documents as you prepped in the master list here. So as I updated, you can go ahead and check individual documents. If I go ahead and check those documents, the properties of those documents, so those will also get updated. So for the project, you can see the document number, that is the item ID, so the division value, the project name. Similarly, some of the custom properties which I updated, like part description and revision description, also updated for each of those documents when I modified the properties. Okay. And in case you want to rename the files also, like say in this case, you want to rename these files to match it to the data set or the item revision name. So in that case, it's better. You can use the master list. In the master list itself, you have the option to create a new file name for each of the document. But I would recommend to use the design manager if really that is a need, and in case if you want to really modify all the component names here. So if I go ahead and open this top part with the design manager, it basically populates again all the BOM links, all the parts, as well as the corresponding properties which are existing now for each of those documents. And I can go ahead and in case if I want to rename all the parts, I can use the select all and use the save as to rename the file. So when I do a save as, in this case, I can also use the draft files, like some of the files has draft also. So I can try to find them. Like in this case, there is one draft file And there was one more draft file which I think I was for the control arm, or is it? I need to check that. So yeah, so these two are the draft files. So for the top level assembly, including all, I basically these are the file names which you will see even on upload, which you will see in under the dataset solid edge dataset type. But in case if you want to match these names to the item IDs, the dataset name to be same as this document number. In that case, you can perform this step, that is the save as file name steps. Otherwise, once the data prep is done, you can go ahead with the upload action. So in this case, I'm just showing the saving as the assembly using the design manager, where I can define the new file name. That is the new file name. I want to copy the existing document number, and I want to paste it under this. Sorry, for before that, I need to say select all and perform a save as first. So I will say expand all, select all, and do a save as. And in this case, it basically allows me to enter the new file name and new location. So in this case, I'm going to use the document number as the file name here. So it updates with the extension, and I will define a new folder for creating this copy here. So I will just copy that and enter that value in all the rows. So the file name will get replaced for each of the document, but the properties remain same. That is the document number, revision name, and the project name property. And the dataset field also I can update to include same number as the document number. So I will just copy the document number field into the data set, and as I perform this operation, I can go ahead and perform the actions to create a copy of the assembly with the renaming of those individual components before upload. So in this case, now it has created the copy of the earlier assembly with the renaming each of the components, including the assembly, whereas the property remains same. But only thing is I just added the dataset name as same as the item ID, that is the document number value. Okay. Now I can go ahead and use the add to Teamcenter. So there is a difference between add to Teamcenter and add to Teamcenter Interactive. The add to Teamcenter can be used this utility can be used for bulk upload mainly, whereas the add to Teamcenter Interactive, you can use it for smaller assemblies, or in case if you have modified an assembly locally where the similar copy resides on the cloud, that is in Teamcenter. Just to modify that delta data, the difference of data compared to the server version, in that case, you can use the add to Teamcenter Interactive. So let's start with the add to Teamcenter first. So if I can go ahead and start the add to Teamcenter. And here I can again, like, because I prepped the data for the full folder, I can use the add folder option here to upload the documents to the cloud here. So in this case, I can select the folder which I already done the data prep here. So I can go ahead and open up that folder, which is the session 2 here. Let me open up. The session 2, the upload folder. So here in this case, I can upload the whole folder, or I can select the top level assembly or multiple solid edge documents for using the add option here. So in this case, I want to upload all the content of upload folder as I done the data prep for a whole folder. So, and in this case, I can, again, similar options are there, like I can select the individual subfolders so that all the components, all the documents which are part of subfolders also get selected for the upload. And similarly, like you have the option to select different solid edge documents which needs to be part of this upload operation. So, and while before performing upload, you also have the option of defining a folder, the destination folder, where it has to upload. But as I mentioned in the session part one, it's just a folder is just a placeholder for the documents to reside. Even though the folder is under my name, but the documents can be searched by all the team members who have access to the same Teamcenter server. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and define a folder, which is just acts as a uh, reference here, and then I will use the operations like dry run or add documents here. So dry run will basically first validate, analyze that data, validate and report any problems if it exists before performing the upload operation. If I'm fine with my data, like if I prep the data correctly, in that case, even I can go ahead and directly upload the documents using add documents. So in this case, let me first define a folder and perform the dry run. Then we will try to upload those documents back to the Teamcenter server here. Yeah, so here in this case, let me create a new folder, like community session hand mixture assembly. Uh, Again, I can copy that same. Okay. So once I select that folder, I can go ahead with the dry run. So in this case, there are options to overwrite. Yeah, the overwrite options are like in case the same data resides on Teamcenter, then in that case we can tell the system to overwrite on those files, or we can exclude that overwrite option here. But as I'm uploading it for the first time, I'm not worried about the overwrite action, and the Teamcenter, like in the back end, it basically validates and it gives you the report saying that the validation is successful. So I can go ahead and either continue, which basically starts uploading the documents to cloud, or I can cancel it. So as I not found any errors in this case, and it says there are 28 parts, and there are 2 assemblies and 2 draft files, and I can go ahead and continue this operation so that it can start uploading the documents to cloud. So as I said earlier, the properties, what makes it matters is the document number property, which gets assigned to the item ID. Okay, and the revision property which we added as a part of the data prep operation gets assigned to revision value. Similarly, the project name gets mapped to item name. So this may take 2-3 minutes. In this case, it's assembly of 32 components. But yeah, it depends on a number of components, or the how big your assembly or the list of document you selected for the upload operation. So, but yeah, when you upload, it's better like you can upload it in batch, But multiple batches we can have, and we can upload all the documents in multiple batch. But it's better, like it's recommended, it should be a one-time upload of all your local project data onto your cloud. It's recommended, like, yeah, you upload all the documents maybe in terms of batches to cloud, and then start working on the cloud copy version, or the documents which are available on the cloud. If you start mixing like this, if you start modifying, even though the data is available on the cloud, if still some users wants to work on the local copy, then again it's a manual process. Like, yeah, all those things needs to be worried. Like, you correctly upload and define the overwrite action, so that the modified design only gets updated back to the cloud. So it's always recommended, like, yeah, you upload the data in a single shot, maybe with multiple batches. But yeah, then it's better to start working on your cloud version of the project, and not on the unmanaged version. And yeah, if this process is new, it's always a good, like, yeah, you can take a sample assembly, or a small assembly, and assign the properties, like document number, revision, some of the custom properties, like, which you want to the system to gets mapped to the Teamcenter property. So in that case, I can start with a small example, preparing a small, taking a small assembly and prepping the data, assigning the property as per your requirement, and and then try to upload that assembly to cloud. And once it uploads back to the cloud, you can open that assembly and see the metadata information, see the bound structure, whether everything is coming as per your requirement. In that case, you can define a process for the upload, and you can start uploading all your data to the cloud. So this is, as I said, very useful, like in case you have legacy data which is managed locally, and you want to start using the built-in cloud data management to create and manage your project on the cloud. So in that case, the data prep utility, the design manager, add to Teamcenter, and add to Teamcenter interactive options helps you in preparing your data and uploading your data to the cloud. So let's see, once I think two of the parts are remaining, that is the draft file. So it basically uploads each component first, and then the assembly, and it updates the BOM links, and it also uploads the parts, like if you have family of parts, family of assemblies, those also gets uploaded. And similarly, the links, like the draft files, also gets uploaded and gets attached to the item revision where its master resides. So once it completes this operation, we'll go ahead and open up this assembly inside your managed from the Teamcenter. Like, it basically shows the status, like the documents got uploaded, added to the library. So I can go ahead and cancel this operation and open up the folder to view that data. So if I go ahead and open using the browse option here. So if I can, it basically, if you remember, during upload, I created a folder with the name of CSHM, and I defined it as a destination folder. So that means all the folder gets reside under the uploaded, and gets added under that folder. But as I said, it's just a reference. Even any other users can search for, once the part gets uploaded, any other user can search based on the item ID or item name or the item description. Okay, or the different custom properties also it can be searched. So as I said, like, the assembly has its own unique ID number. So this is a, if you remember while doing the data prep, this was the document number value. So that gets assigned to the item ID, and the project name which we entered in the during the data prep operation gets mapped to the item name value. Similarly, you can see the description value, that is the item revision description value, which also gets updated under those columns here. And you can see the linked parts which also gets uploaded with this operation. And similarly, there were certain draft files which we added as a part of the upload, and which also can see here by applying the filter where it basically shows those draft files which got added. So let me open up the assembly here, and we can view the same assembly which we were managing locally, and then we did the data prep, and also we changed the naming, the file names, which is not like required, like yeah, it's up to you, like whether in case if you really want to maintain the same file name, same data set name, in that case you can use the design manager design manager feature to rename your files. But no, if not required, that in that case you can go ahead with the directly uploading the document. So if I go ahead and view the properties in Teamcenter, as the top part is the active part, it opens up the top level assembly inside posted active workspace, wherein we can view the metadata information of the assembly. Similarly, we can select individual components and view the corresponding metadata information. So you can see the item ID, item name, that is the project name which get mapped, and similarly the description, that is the part description which we added in a separate column will also get mapped. And if you see the name, the data set name also, as we entered in the design manager option, while performing the copy of the assembly, the same thing gets also updated. And similarly, if you go ahead and check the file name for individual components, those are also updated accordingly. So as we renamed the assembly, the file name also will appear as it was there in the folder structure before performing the upload of operation. Okay, so uh, the next thing is like just to show the save just to show the add to Teamcenter Interactive. What I will do is I will just modify the assembly locally, and then we'll come back and upload it using the add to Teamcenter Interactive. So in this case, as I said, let's open one more time. Yeah, so you can see the named reference, where you can see the assembly file name, which is also updated here. Okay, so let's close this assembly and try to modify this assembly in an unmanaged environment. Maybe I will just modify by adding some components, and then we'll try to upload again the delta, that is the delta changes which we did back to the cloud here. So I can go ahead and open up the top level assembly. And here in this case, I will just add a couple of parts and modify a part of a sub assembly here. So in this case, let me take up this sub assembly in which there is a fan part, which I want to modify. So I will just edit it first, and I'm going to modify the fins here. So let me edit the profile, and instead of 15 count here, let me make it as a 12 here. So the part gets updated with 12 fins here, and this is the one use case, that is I have modified one of the part which I'm going to save, and similarly I am going to add two new parts to the sub assembly here. So I can go back to uh, uh, the library here, just add a couple of parts to show this use case. I'm not worried about positioning those components, and let me go back and save that subassembly here, because you have added the components, the BOM structure has changed. That means the subassembly has to be saved, and I can go ahead and save the top level assembly also. So certain operations I have performed, that is modified a part, added two new components because of which the subassembly got modified, and now I need to update this information back to the cloud. So in this case, I can use the add to Teamcenter Interactive. So, so if you are moving towards cloud, it's better, like as I said earlier, to move your data 100% and start working on the cloud. But in this case, just to show, like in case if you download or if you modify the subassembly in unmanaged environment and then you want to update it back, in that case, you can use the Add to Teamcenter Interactive, which can be used because here it provides some more options to control or to cross validate between the local copy and the server copy. So the local copy, which I modified now, and there is already a copy which is available on the cloud. So if I go ahead and select the same assembly here, so it basically shows like I can go ahead and say find all linked documents. It finds all the BOM structure, and then I can also say if there are some draft files, associated draft files, I can use the find all the related draft for performing this operation. So in this case, I can run the unmanaged validation, which basically checks for the duplicate file name, item ID, and revision. So in this case, for two of the components which I added, it basically says a certain property is missing. That is, the document number property is missing. So that's the reason it shows that warning. And I can go ahead and compare this copy of this assembly with the Teamcenter version. So that is the by retrieving the data from Teamcenter. So in as I click on this option, it basically loads the corresponding assembly from the Teamcenter from the cloud, and it compares this assembly structure and with individual part modified date with the server version. So based on that, it automatically sets the Teamcenter action. So in this case, as we saw, like I added the two components. So that's the reason it shows those two new components which are newly added, but the default action is set to new item that has to be uploaded in case if you want to upload it. But for the non-modified components, it is automatically set to use existing. So for me, not need to worry like about what needs action needs to be set. But for the subassembly, because the structure got modified, the default action is set to upload. So if I say use existing, in that case, the components may not get uploaded because the structure subassembly structure as modified. I will use the default action as upload. Okay. Similarly, for because I modified the front fan, by the default action is set to upload. Okay. So now I can go ahead and I can perform for these two new components. I need to define the mandatory field values here. So I can go ahead and say assign all, or I can define a custom unique ID for these parts also. Okay, similarly, I can define the folder which where it is to gets uploaded. So similarly for earlier assembly, I use CSHM. For these two new parts also, I will define the same folder here. And as I perform, I will just use the validation check here before upload. So as those two new components gets validated, I am good to go with the performing this action. So once I perform, so you can see the dialog here, which takes only those parts which are defined based on those actions here, Teamcenter action here. So in my case, I modified the top level assembly and the sub assembly. That's the reason it is showing two assembly, and I modified a single part, and I'm uploading two new parts. So that's the reason the count is three here. Okay, for three for part and two for the assembly, and so total five parts will get uploaded, and it gets override on the existing components which are available on the cloud. So once it completes uploading this, then maybe we'll open the same assembly just to cross validate whether the new parts which have been uploaded correctly under that sub assembly. And once we validate that, we will go ahead and see the next feature, that is the cloning of the assembly. So cloning of the assembly is very much needed for any designer. So especially when they want to reuse some of the existing design onto their new project. So they basically reuse some of the existing design, maybe 10% or 20%, maybe more than that. They want to copy to the new design or new project. In that case, they can use the Solid Edge structure editor to clone the assembly. So the next action which I'm going to show is on the cloning of the assemblies using the Solid Edge structure editor. Okay, so once we complete that cloning, we'll go ahead with some of the simple operations like defining the project, defining a document and attaching it against a defined project, and similarly some of the what's new option in Teamcenter 2512. So it might take another I might take another 10-15 minutes to cover up the remaining topics here. Okay. So it has uploaded. So let me close this and open up the same assembly where we modified the sub-assembly and we added two parts. So let's open up the same assembly inside Teamcenter and load it into our Solid Edge session and view that sub-assembly and validate whether those have been updated or not. Okay, so you can see because we have modified the components, maybe we need to expand the sub-assembly structure, and you can see the new components which got added here, and similarly the front fan which has been updated to as we modified in the local copy. Okay. So let's next see the cloning of the assembly using the structure editor. So let me open up the structure editor. So this is structure editor is useful to copy to create a duplicate or to create a clone of your cloud data. Not like you are not modifying the local data again. So when you open the documents inside the structure editor, you are opening the document from the cloud, that is from the Teamcenter server. So as I use the open existing document, I can select the assembly which for which in which I want to create some of the cloning operation, basically to reuse some of the design to the in the next project. So I can go ahead and open the assembly here, and I can perform different operations here for modifying or creating a copy of the parts using the save as operations here. So I can say uh, select all, or I can say expand all, and then perform the action for certain of the component. Like in this case, I can go ahead and define certain actions for the subassembly or individual components here. So in case if I want to reuse the motor assembly in my new project, so with also saving a copy of the top level assembly, in that case, I can define the action as save as for the top level assembly. Similarly, the sub assembly, I want to perform a save as operation. So, and maybe certain components I do not want to use, or like say, for example, maybe turbo switch. I can remove it from the new copy, new news from the new bomb, from the new structure. This particular component gets removed. That doesn't mean it gets deleted from the server. It basically will not be part of the assembly where it under which it resides as of now. So I just removed one of the operation, and similarly I can perform multiple such operations. Like I can say I can create a new part. I can add a new part onto that subassembly before opening that inside Solid Edge. I can add a new part. Similarly, I can add an existing part, remove an existing part. So remove an existing part already I showed. So add, I can use the add operation to add a part which needs to be part of that new project and as a part of that subassembly here. So in this case, I can go ahead and add any existing part to the subassembly here. So let me add up one of the part here. Let's say custom bracket, and no, that gets added. So the you can see in the structure, I defined different operations here. One is I removed one of the component from the subassembly. So that's the reason it has been removed from the right hand structure here, right hand pane here. Okay, and for the new part, I need to define the minimum required properties, that is the item ID, revision, and item name. And because I have set the action as save as, here also I need to define the item ID, revision, and item name for the new copy of that one. So in this case, let me go ahead and use the assign all option. So by default, it gets all the values gets assigned, and I can save this under the same folder or a new folder. Better it's to select a new folder, and I can perform the action here. So as I continue with the action, so what it creates in the backend is it creates a copy of the top level assembly because it has been set to save as. For the subassembly, as the action is set to again save as, it creates a copy with the new number. And for the new component which I added, it also creates a new item ID under that subassembly structure. But for that, the Solid Edge data set will not get added. For that, we need to open that part and select a new template inside Solid Edge to create a new data set for that newly added component under this subassembly here. So as it performs, the step, we can go ahead and validate the newly updated copy, that is structure of the new assembly, copied assembly inside Solid Edge, and then we'll go through some of the other operations. So the next action we'll see, next feature we'll see is the projects. Okay, so the projects is something which is basically a team center feature, like which basically helps users to manage, create, and use projects to organize the data, restrict the access, and also it can be used to collaboratively design the assembly. Basically, it acts as a container. The project acts as a container that brings together the data, like parts, documents, requirements, and teams, to do specific task or deliverables. So in this case, let's okay, some problem happened in the back end, but anyway, so let's go ahead and continue with the other operations, like defining the project here. So as I said, they are creating defining a project is a team center operation. But what is possible inside Solid Edge is you can select individual or multiple documents and assign it to a specific project. So in this case, let's open up the hosted active workspace and check the projects, whether there are some existing projects or whether we can create a new project here. So if I go to the Explorer and see under the projects, there are already some projects which are available. So you can create a new project. So as I said, it's a container. You can add in different files, designs, or requirements, and assign it under a specific project. So the way to create a new project is you can select the project and you can go ahead and create a new project. But let's utilize one of the existing project in the interest of time, which basically wherein basically I can show some of the designs which are part of that project. Basically, those assemblies, those designs are assigned against that specific project here. So that's the reason when I go to the list of design, it basically shows those assemblies against that project. Similarly, if you can assign, you can add an existing design or create a new design and add it to that same project here. And similarly, you can add the members and provide a different roles, define a different roles, and set the privilege option for those users. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and add a new design, or that is created design to the existing project here using the add option. So basically, I'm showing how we can add a existing design to an as the existing project here. So for new design, I can while creating a new part only I can add it. But in this case, I'm going to use an existing assembly and assign it under this project here. So in this case, I can go ahead and search for the new assembly which I created. So I can go ahead and assign this assembly to that project. So this way we can assign it, or you can also remove it from that project here. Okay. From the solid, similar thing can be done from the Solid Edge side also. Like if I go ahead and open up the design, now you can see it should have the new assembly also assigned under that project. So if I go ahead and check it inside Solid Edge, like say I already the top level assembly is active. If I go ahead and see the option of assign project ID, so in that case, it basically show the highlights. It shows the tick mark. That means this top assembly is already assigned to that project, which we just did on the active workspace side, and the same has been updated on the solid edge side also. Similarly, like if I can go ahead and select any other design item and assign that individual component to the same project here, like say maybe I have not selected correctly. So let's select that part or maybe another part uh, and assign it to the project here. So like that, I can assign all the documents using the assign project ID to all to the same project, or I can select individual components and assign it to a specific project or more than one project if that is the case. So as I selected that, like if I go ahead and check the Teamcenter information for that part for which I already assigned the project, you can see under that project tab, the project name which it has been tagged to also gets updated. Okay. Similarly, I can remove it from here only. Like I can select the part, and in case if I want to remove, then I can remove that check mark and update, and the same thing also gets updated on the Teamcenter side instantly. Okay, so that gets removed. So you can add, remove the documents to certain project, individual project, or multiple projects from the solid edge side only. Okay. So the next option which I wanted to show is on the update status info and synchronize. But in this case, I may not be able to show it, but I'm just going to explain like what it does. Like in case if I open the top level assembly and we are working in context of the top level assembly, and there are some other users which are working on the sub assembly and modified some of those components. Maybe they have saved it or they have revised it. In case they have saved a new version to the cloud, in that case, when you run the update status info, it basically shows those documents for which and the new version is available. So in case some other user has revised certain parts, and when you click on the update status info for against those revised part, it will show new revision is available because you have already loaded the session and somebody or some other users have modified on their system and uploaded those changes back to Teamcenter. In that case, it basically compares the update status info, compares the existing version which has been loaded with the latest version which is available on the cloud, and based on that status, it gets those components gets notified in the Pathfinder. And in case if you really want to load the latest version, which has been modified by the other designer, or the new version which is available for certain of the components, in that case, if they want to update those changes inside their assembly, in that case, they can use the synchronize option. So synchronize option will replace the existing version with the latest version which is available on the cloud. Similarly, the latest revision in case that is available on the cloud. Okay. Synchronized property is something like which updates the file properties or the callouts in case those are modified on the server side or on the active workspace side. If somebody has modified the properties, the metadata information or the property information, and you really want to see like whether those are updated in your session or on your draft files where the callouts are referenced with the custom properties. In that case, we can update those properties using the synchronized property feature here. So this has been introduced in the last version, specifically when you load the assembly with with the expand expedite seek preference, which is set to true. That is the new way of loading your assembly faster. So if by default that is set to true in the solid edge built-in data management mode, that means like the property information doesn't get instantly updated. It gets only updated when you do in-place activation or when you edit the part or edit the draft files. So that is the reason we added the synchronized property, a separate command for you to update the properties, required properties, modified properties instantly using this new option. Based on many customer request, a new option that is new option of defining the pattern. So that is for following up a specific custom part numbering and revisioning pattern or scheme has been added. So users can customers can use this functionality to define their own part numbering standards. So here you can go to the video, like as an administrator, as a company administrator, you can define a pattern for a new item ID, that is for a new CAD design, and wherein it allows you to define the prefix, suffix, as well as the rule format with the initial and the final value. So once you set that pattern and go ahead and create a new design as a designer, it follows up that same pattern, and the item IDs will be created based on that pattern. Similarly, you can revise when you create not revise when you create a new part, the second part again that gets updated with the next available number, the next consecutive number. Similarly, you can define a pattern for revisions also. If in case if you are following a specific format for the revisioning, then you can define that revisioning as a part of your custom revisioning pattern, and that gets applied for your sessions whenever you try to create revise a part, so that same new pattern gets applied automatically. So in this case, you are saying the part we just want to release it before we are revising. So as we revise the part, it will take the new pattern by default pattern which has been set by the administrator. Similarly, you can define the pattern for the part number, because the item ID is unique. The for part number also, like item ID is unique. So part number, you can use your internal part numbering scheme, and for the part number property also you can define the rule format with the initial value and the final value, and the same gets applied whenever you create a new new item ID. And in this case, like you can have multiple patterns, and you can delete the existing pattern. So in this case, we have created multiple patterns. So that's the reason, as we created more than one pattern, it shows up the list of available patterns when you are creating a new design, and you can go ahead and select any pattern to apply that pattern for creating a new design. So maybe you might have a certain standard, like for mechanical designs, it should follow certain pattern. Electrical components, it should follow another pattern, and maybe for standard parts, it might need to follow some other pattern. So you can define the different patterns for the item IDs, and while creating a new design, you can apply those accordingly as per your requirement. So the next enhancement is on the release process, which was until previous version, it was a simple one-click release process, which was available out of the box for the built-in cloud data management users. But based on certain customers' request, we enhanced this release process, which basically gives you a greater control. So basically, it avoids with releasing accidental the assembly and the components. With this new release process, like you can see for the in this example, where a sub-assembly we have opened, and before release, like in case if you really want to set, you can freeze the design. That means the you cannot further modify the design. So using the freeze option, you can set the status as freeze, and similarly with the release option, basically with it allows you to when you select the top level assembly, even the components gets selected for the release operation, in which you can define a approver for releasing the design. So once I add the approver, so the task goes to that specific approver inbox, and that user can open that task from his inbox and view the assembly, and either approve it or reject it. So in this case, like, yeah, we're going ahead and rejecting it, as certain modification has to be done correctly. And once we reject it, it goes back to the designer who has created or started that release task, and he can take the actions accordingly, and then again proceed with the approver changes. So again, it goes back to the approver, where they can check the changes, like whether in case the all the assembly is up to date. In that case, they can go ahead and approve the design. So once the design is approved, the status gets set as released for the top level assembly, including the components here. So if you can go ahead and check the assembly status, in the BOM, so the status will be set to with the release pack. Okay. So so these are some additional related resources which are available on YouTube. Most of these videos content was covered in the part 1 and part 2 session, and there are around 8 videos which are available on YouTube, which basically shows the same content as we covered in these 2 sessions, starting with creating and managing the design on the cloud, and for legacy customers, how we can prep the data, upload using ATT or ATTI, and also some of the cloning operations which can be performed, which I showed in today's session. So we can go through the YouTube link, and I feel like, yeah, these videos also will be very helpful in case if you are planning to adopt the built-in data management using the Designcenter X Solid Edge. Thank you for your time, and in case there are questions in the chat, I will try to reply them individually, and also we'll update them on the community site. Yeah, thank you.
For anyone who's still here, did want to let you know that is the link on your screen right now. You can click on it for the Designcenter Solid Edge community, and that is where the recording will be on Friday. So if you want to review this again, it's a lot of material. You can do that from the location shown there on Friday. I just wanted to mention this one. Marketing has let me know that they do like high quality reviews of the product. If you enjoy Solid Edge, please do use the link there or scan. You can do a mobile review on your phone to go to G2 and give your feedback on using Solid Edge. And then lastly, Realize Live. If you didn't know, this is our annual customer event held in actually 4 locations. But the 4th one is in Chinese. So if you're on this call, you probably want to go to one that's in English. This is the contact. So Sangamesh is one of our senior application engineers. That is the link again to the forums. So thanks for those of you who were able to stay for the entire session, and we will see you in the forums or hopefully at Realize Live. If you're there, come say hi at the community corner. I'll be there.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.